Hey, I'm Storm, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I wanted to show you my OC, Nico, and try to redraw him in my own style, or I suppose edit him. I save the line art here, or at least most of it, and I'm going to be trying to adjust it to make it fit the style that I see in more of my art, because it's been a bit since I drew when I chose to draw him, and I noticed a few things were off. Particularly, I noticed that I did oddly detailed ears for my usual, really small eyes, that is a horrible arrow, that's not better, really small eyes, an oddly long nose, like it's fine that it's pointed, but normally it wouldn't have that long of an an intro, I don't know, and his jaw's a little crooked, which isn't a problem on its own, but the shadow behind the jaw is really small for what I would normally do. Normally, it would be like a swooping shadow like this, and I don't know what triggered that change or what caused that change, aside from I just completely forgot how I drew. Because you can see it in a lot of my other art that I have shadows in a certain way, I have larger eyes, usually I have smaller foreheads. I don't really have a good explanation for why I changed these things, aside from just it's been a bit. So with that, we are going to attempt to fix my own art, to look more like my own art. Hello, VoiceOver Storm here. While past me works out all the actual art stuff, I thought I'd take this opportunity to talk about the character I'm working on. As mentioned before, his name is Nico, which is short for Nicholas. While I do consider him an original character, he's technically a fan character as well. Specifically, he's a fan character based off of Epic the Musical, one of my recent fixations. I don't know all that much about the Odyssey, which is why I say he's a fan character for Epic specifically. As I intended him, he's one of Odysseus' 600 men, and for all intents and purposes, he's a background character. He's not really there for the plot, just for my own personal enjoyment. That said, I did give him some backstory and a little AU for him to exist in order to make him more than just a face. First thing that stands out about him, at least in my opinion, is that he's the youngest of the crew. I know that Elpenor is the youngest in the Odyssey, being 13 when he joined the war, but I made Nico even younger, only 10 when the war began, being 20 by the beginning of Epic. I did this for two reasons. One, I wanted him to view some of the crew, mainly Odysseus and Polites, as father figures as he grew up. And two, I'm 18, and I do not trust myself to make a character more than a few years older than me. Anyway, seeing Polites and Odysseus as father figures / at the very least role models, I like to think that Nico has become someone with an incredible capacity for kindness, as well as an equally incredible capacity for violence. But of the two, he'd always choose kindness. He's undyingly loyal to his captain and crew and is always eager to help, and despite the things that he's seen at such a young age, he's maintained a genuinely positive outlook and demeanor. As for why he joined the war so young, I have no idea how drafting worked in ancient Greece, but for Nico's story, the reason he joined at only 10 years old is because his father was very sick. Maybe not the most original idea, but it made the most sense to me when I was writing it. Something somewhat important to know about Nico is that while he doesn't know it, he was adopted, in a sense. His parents, the ones who raised him, found him as a baby and took him in. They never told him, but he never suspected it either. I'm mildly aware of the Mary Sue-like turn this is about to take, but I don't really care. He's half human, half water nymph. Because of this, he's always been stronger than he looks, and he is a particularly strong swimmer. However, since neither he nor his parents know of his heritage, they figured he was just a very gifted human. This belief never really became a problem, and the strength he got from it actually helped him quite a lot on his journey. Also, I just thought of this while recording, but I like the idea that even if he can't pin down why, he sees the sirens much more like equals than as monsters or anything like that. And while Nico is naturally a kind-hearted person who would extend that care to anyone, seeing them as the same rather than as monsters would cause a lot more conflict between him and some of the other crew members, specifically Odysseus, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, even as a young child, Nico was always artistically driven. He was always very articulate for his age and was something of a poet. That's actually why on his Toy House profile, I put, "Born to be a poet, forced to be a soldier." Cliche? Maybe, I don't really care. Anyway, Nico was an artist of many formats and even drew when he was able to, but primarily he took to song. He sang to himself as a comfort, which is something that a lot of the crew picked up on. They found it sad at first hearing a 10-year-old boy's voice carry over the waves, but they grew to find it endearing and even comforting. As an older teen and adult, obviously his voice would mature, but it still remains pleasant to listen to. He's come up with a few songs that he sings often, and I like to think that they're recognizable by any of the crew members. He still sings for his own comfort, but he also enjoys getting to make others smile with his talents. Due to his artistic talent, I like to think that he's looked on favorably by Apollo, who would not speak to him directly, but would still generally support him in subtle ways when possible. Now, to get a little meta, Epic the Musical is about embracing ruthlessness to protect yourself and your loved ones. Odysseus does this by, in part, discarding his goodness and becoming the monster. I like to think that Nico is the alternative path to this. He's fully capable of equal, if not even deeper violence than Odysseus, but he actively chooses not to follow through on it. He chooses love and kindness no matter how far he's pushed. He sees no point in cruelty for the sake of it, and I like to imagine that this would be seen in his fighting style. In his fight scenes, if he were to have any, he would aim for painless incapacitation rather than killing, and if he did choose to kill, he would ensure that it was as swift and painless as possible, often before the target even knew it was happening. Because of this, I like to think that he would be simultaneously the most terrifying and the most comforting person on that battlefield, depending on which side you're on. All that said, I generally see Nico as an alternative to Odysseus, not as an alternative protagonist, of course. As mentioned before, he is very intentionally a background character, but I see him as an alternative to Odysseus's change in ideologies. I keep mentioning that Nico is connected to both Polites and Odysseus, and that's kind of the whole point. He's like if someone with Odysseus's base mindset held on to the open arms ideology. Something that I very intentionally laid out in the backstory that I am fully aware I have yet to explain properly is that Nico goes through a lot of the same hardships as Odysseus. Specifically, one of the most important ones is that in the underworld, while Odysseus is having his little meet and greet with both Polites and his mother, Nico finds out that his father, the one who he went into war for because he was sick, passed away while he was gone. And for the extra angst of it, not only was his father there, but so was his mother and the family dog. Not that I am sure if dogs go to the underworld in Greek mythology, I'd have to check. That's not the point. The point is, while Odysseus was finding out that he lost his mother, Nico found out that he lost everything. While I didn't intend this for Nico when I was initially crafting his character, he became not only an alternative path to Odysseus, but his complete foil. He is a younger man going through the exact same events from a similar, if not worse, perspective, but he comes out on the other side loving and greeting the world with open arms. And Odysseus, well...
Cut off their tails! We're ending this now! Throw their bodies back in the water. Let them drown.
Yeah, that's not open arms, buddy. But anyway, this is not meant as a critique of Odysseus by any means, and this is also not me saying that I made Nico to be better than him, just different. He is different from Odysseus in a very fundamental way that I can't really put into words, but I'm sure you probably understand it in some way if you've been listening this far. That's not the point. The point is, while Odysseus is a flawed and selfish character, Nico is a flawed and selfless character. That selflessness is, yes, a good quality, but it's also one that can and will lead to his destruction. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, but we have other things to talk about. Now, to get even more meta, I know that most characters in Epic have their own signature instrument or motif or both, and I like to think that Nico would have his own as well. Specifically, I think his signature instrument would be bells, usually high-pitched and melodic, but sometimes changing to be more like church bells for darker songs. This is because while he is his own person, as I've mentioned before, his main influences while growing up were Polites, so high-pitched and melodic mallets, and Odysseus, with instrument type changing based on the scenario. Also, despite Nico being the youngest, I like to imagine that the crew would sometimes sing to back him up in the same way that they do for Eurylochus. Generally, I think bells would be a big thing for him musically. And this part is, I don't even know if it's meta exactly, but it's just something silly that I wanted to throw in. The reason that I have Nico as a character at all is because I wanted to come up with a character that would sing a fan song that I wrote, and in that fan song, he makes a reference to No Longer You. If I remember correctly, No Longer You is never referenced by any character other than the Prophet. No one ever calls back to that throughout the entirety of Epic. But, as I said, I like to think that Nico is looked on favorably by Apollo. Because of that, I like to think that Nico would have some sort of connection to the power of prophecy, even if it's not something that's strong enough for him to fully understand it. So for him to be the one character to call back to what the prophet says, that seems like an interesting idea for me. As of currently, I only have one song written for Nico, and it's mostly just an amalgam of a bunch of other songs from Epic the Musical. So I wouldn't even really call it an original fan song, it's just something that I threw together for fun using beatbox of all things. But I am planning on posting it soon, which is actually why I'm making this video. I feel like Nico deserves some context, so that way the song makes more sense within it. Honestly, I've been writing and creating characters for longer than I can remember, but this is honestly the most thought and effort that I've put into a character so far, which is kind of funny to me considering that, again, I've been doing this for a long time, even if I didn't necessarily have the art skills to back it up. I say as though I currently have the art skills to back it up, but still. This is a character that I care a lot about, which I'm sure you can see considering that I actually took the time to fix the first drawing that I made of him. For most of my characters, I like them, so I draw them once to get the idea out of my head, and if it's not right, oh well, I'll probably get to it later, versus with Nico, it took me about 2 days to realize I am not satisfied with how this original image looks, and I want to give him something better. He deserves better, and caring that much about a character that I made, even if he is a fan character of some pre-existing media, is honestly kind of cool, and I like this. I really do like Nicholas as a character, and I hope you do too. Anyway, I will link his song in the description once it's out, and I hope you'll give that a listen. And even if you choose not to, I do hope that you enjoyed hearing about his story and seeing his art. It honestly means a lot to me if you watched this far, so thank you for watching, genuinely. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.